Remember when I just put out that video about Overpower Sever and how it was capping out at like 2 billion DPS if you consider all 4 of the Severs hitting the boss simultaneously? Well, now it's doing this. And while it's going to take your eyes a couple seconds to adjust to the new truncated damage numbers, which hopefully we get a toggle for, it's going to be really hard for me to test damage numbers if I can't see them all, but that's a different topic of conversation. Here we're talking about Overpower Sever, and we are now doing 2 billion damage and even more per hit, depending on who the target is. After realizing what this build was capable of, I've spent the past day slamming my head against the highest pit tier that I've currently cleared, which is a tier 94, trying to get 1, just good gameplay footage, but 2, really iron out all of the kinks in this build, all the different parts of it, understanding the mechanisms, understanding the skill rotation, etc. And I think I've got it down to a near science. We've made some amazingly huge discoveries about the build. We've vastly improved my own gear just so we can show it off a bit more. Fully empowered by a Bone Spirit battery whose only purpose is to spend your essence. Then you're able to dump in a Sever where all 4 of the individual specters can hit a single target, again, doing over 2 billion damage per Sever. And if we consider this proccing once per second, it means against a single target, we're outputting about 8 billion DPS, which is a far cry from the maximum of 3 to 400 million DPS I was getting on Sever before swapping over to this Overpower version. Now, the really cool thing about all of this is that this Overpower tech doesn't only work for Sever, and I'm going to be bringing this exact same tech and basically just gear swapping and retrofitting out to try things like Bone Spear with Deathless Visage, where those also overpower whenever you would trigger them. There's a lot of very interesting things that we're able to do with this. But this video is going to be a little bit more straightforward with how I typically like to do it. I want to go over all the aspects, the skill decisions, where I'm getting the various stats that I am, and go bit by bit so that you have a better idea of how we're accomplishing this. Oh, and the best part, just from some of the people who are like, hey, that's too many mythics, I can't really build this, I also dropped Tyrael's Might from this build, so we have even less gear requirements. You can use even more legendary pieces of gear. Are some of the mythics going to be best in slot? Of course they are. They're mythics, but they are not build defining. You do not require them to make the build do this. They're just the best damage options that are available. So just to very quickly cover the mechanics of the build, because I think that those are going to be the most important thing for you to walk away with in case you're trying to replicate this yourself. The idea is that we want to overpower on Sever by using Banished Lord's Talisman. The way that we accomplish that is by getting a huge amount of maximum resource. So you'll see I currently sit at 153. Using Path of Trighoul, which is going to spit out 30 Bone Splinters, which each get you 2 maximum essence every single time that they hit, as well as the chance for Bone Splinters projectiles to hit twice Weapon Temper. We basically gain upwards of 120 additional bonus resource here, meaning that with nothing else going on, I'm already at 273 maximum resource. That's enough to basically cast Sever, cast Bone Spirit. It will then trigger Banished Lord's Talisman, which says that after spending 275 primary resource, your next core skill will overpower. And on top of that, any skill that crits and overpowers will gain a huge multiplier. So Sever, Bone Spirit, and then Sever again will make Sever Overpower. That's where we're getting those over 2 billion damage procs against the elites in this pit. And then everything else on the build is there to basically functionally empower our overpower damage, which is going to get a huge amount of additive multiplier from the difference between your maximum life and your minimum life. So you'll see I have over 14,000 maximum life, and on top of that, I gain an additional 20%. So that's another roughly 2,900 maximum life here. And then all of this maximum life and the Fortify that we generate over our base life gives us thousands upon thousands of overpower additive damage, taking our additive damage multiplier and taking it from around like a 20 times damage multiplier up to like a 40 times damage multiplier here, as well as just gaining additional 50% damage bonus from overpowering innately. The last very cool tech thing that isn't immediately apparent just from looking at the build planner is the addition of Tam Wat Runeword. This is Essential Disdain. What this does is that this casts Decrepify for us, but it doesn't cast normal Decrepify. It casts Horrid Decrepify. Horrid Decrepify is this option that you may have never clicked unless you used to do Abattoir of Zir back in the day. It says that when you hit an enemy that's below 10% maximum life, you automatically execute it. It doesn't work on bosses, but it helps with Waller elites who have an insane amount of additional damage, killing damage resistance auras altogether that much quickly, and the additional life monsters that are walking around. They have so much life that just cutting off 10% at the end is a massive, massive gain to your overall survivability, first and foremost, because less elites walking around, less damage you got to take, but also just a huge amount of kill speed. But the cool part about it is that when this rune word procs Decrepify, It also casts your Decrepify, which is abhorrent, so you get best of both worlds. It applies both effects. What that means is that we neither need it on our skill bar here, nor do we need Cursed or to have 100% uptime on curses. You just cast your Sever 4 times, which you're kind of doing while you're, rallying up all the monsters and pulling them into one big area. And then as you're spamming Sever, you have permanent uptime on this curse. Also, a little bit of a bonus damage here. Applying the curse this often is triggering our key passive Affliction to do a very small amount of damage, but hey, it's there too. It's trying. Let's talk about the rest of the gear that's going to empower the build further. Always remember, I have a build planner down below in the description as well as in the pinned comment. This will also be updated on max roll once I've finished fine-tuning the exact stats that I'm looking for. Obviously, Air of Perdition is a massive damage bonus here. Core skill ranks, critical strike chance. This helps to shore up a ton of the crit chance that you'll need for the build without needing to use different aspects. And then it just comes along with the 60% damage multiplier, which is pretty zesty right there. As well as having the movement speed and the lucky hit chance. Lucky hit chance is really good for triggering all of our procs, especially against single targets, and then the movement speed helps us to not feel like such a slow potato because we don't have access to mobility skills. You'll notice that I've dropped Tyraels from the build, and oddly enough, Tyraels is really good. Completely solves all your resistances, gets you max resistance, as well as more damage reduction. But it turns out I was physically unkillable with Tyraels on. When I wanted to reset a run, but I had already aggroed monsters, it would take a minute plus for me to die just standing in the middle of them because I had Tyraels on. On top of that, it was not technically empowering us as much as it could. Instead, we swapped over to a legendary piece of gear. This helps us to solve our armor issues just a little bit from using too many legendaries, but also able to get a huge maximum life roll on it. You'll notice I went with all resistance to be able to shore that up a little bit, and then also adds on another temper, the temper being corpse tendril size. I can't tell you how important it is to try to hit a 50% corpse tendril size because there are monsters that will tend to, splay out from around where you're fighting. Most notably succubi, the vampire lords that kind of teleport away in that little cloud of bats. There are a lot of, and the goat shamans and the snake shamans. There are a lot of monsters that won't get close enough for normal corpse tendrils, but this temper basically makes it so everything gets pulled in. Huge amount of efficiency, a ton of safety gain from that as well. We're also able to add on another damage multiplier in the form of exploiters. Now, the way that exploiters works, it says that if you were to make an elite monster unstoppable, meaning you were to try to hard crowd control them with a stun 3 times, which we're doing all of the time, not only with corpse tendrils, but also from Decrepify, they will become unstoppable, and you will now deal up to 45% additional damage against them. It turns out that the longest part of this entire pit push is just killing the elites to get into the boss fight. Once you're in the boss fight, you just hold down Bone Spirit and Sever, and then just cast your things when they come off of cooldown. This is where we're putting Voracious Titanic, which is Pock and Zal. You're going to gain an additional 20% maximum life, which is just even more survivability, but on top of that, further increases our overpower damage. We got GA Max Life, GA Sever gloves here. I haven't finished masterworking them, but being able to put on the Overpower additive temper, it will even further increase your damage, either attack speed or crit chance, whatever you need to reach cap. And in fact, I shouldn't need anything here, and I can instead put armor here to be able to hit those caps, or put on more intelligence for additional damage. Here's where I have Grasping Veins. I wish I could find higher than a 19% Grasping Veins, but apparently they just don't exist in this video game. Shoutouts if you actually have found perfect aspects on your ancestral gear. I think I've found maybe 2 since the start of the season, and you're not going to see the majority of them on this build right now. Blood Moon Breaches is obviously a great addition to the kit because it says you deal 2.5 times damage in Overpower to any target that you curse. That's just absolutely bananas insane. We happen to get lucky and get a GA maximum life Blood Moon Breaches here. The rest of the GAs really wouldn't matter. Curse skills is kind of okay, just because it slightly decreases monsters' speed and damage on your Decrepify procs, but really that's the only GA that matters, that and the unique aspect. On the boots, obviously we need Path of Trigul to be able to make the build work. You would want to get GAs and actually masterwork crit the armor of all things here. Bone Prison cooldown doesn't matter, movement speed is nice, but the armor is what you're going to need, especially if you're using Tyraels, be able to cap on your armor. This has been a huge problem with me trying to transition into this build because I just can't get lucky with my masterwork crits. For the weapon, we swapped swapped over to a two-handed mace. Two-handed mace comes along with nearly 400 additive overpower damage. That seems insane. The most important GA here would be GA max life. Then you want intelligence and the lucky hit chance to be able to restore resource. This is how we're able to continuously power out bone spirits so that our next Sever attack is successfully overpowering because we're eating our full essence globe every single time. Here's where you want to put Reaping Lotus, an insane multiplier. I also don't have a perfect version of this. So I currently could have a 3.4 times multiplier, and I'm just at a 2.86. Pretty nutty. Again, this is where you want to put as essential Disdain, the rune word, to be able to proc your curses. Banished Lord's Talisman, most important GA is maximum life, second most is attack speed, and then core skill. You would also want the damage aspect to be as high as possible, but the difference between like a 50 and a 60 is it's not great. You want a perfect one, but the difference between them is not super bad. Getting those GAs on max life and attack speed is a significantly large bonus to your overall output here. I am using a Ring of Starless Skies. I have absolutely crap masterworks across it. Oddly enough, we would want to either hit our attack speed cap or our crit cap via this ring, and then we would want everything else to be in core skill. Lucky hit chance is kind of nice. Then obviously it's just a huge damage multi. If you didn't have a Ring of Starless Skies, you would want attack speed, crit chance, and then maximum life on a ring. And in addition to that, you would want to temper on resource cost reduction and overpower additive damage. Similarly, for the Air of Perdition, if you didn't have this, you're going to have to find more crit chance on the rest of your gear, obviously, but you would want to go with cooldown reduction, intelligence, and maximum life on a helmet, and then you would want to put on an aspect either Hardened Bones for more survivability would be a really good option here. For our other ring, this is not great because we had to retrofit this ring from a different build onto this build, and then again, either attack speed or crit chance. You want Casting Macabre restores essence just so that you can immediately cast Sever anytime that you cast Bone Spirit. So basically, you just need this to at least say 22. You really don't want to masterwork it at all. And then you'll notice I still have critical strike damage on here. I need to reroll this over to overpower damage. I'm just afraid of bricking it. The last aspect that you're going to put onto the build is Damned for a huge shadow damage multiplier against cursed targets, because obviously that's like the biggest thing that we can put on it for Sever. Book of the Dead, sacrificing Reapers for shadow damage, sacrificing Bone Mages for overpower damage, and then sacrificing Golem for crit damage. Now, something that I did play around with when the CC was just like absolutely aggravating me to no end was dropping Blood Mist from my build and adding on Blood Golem. Blood Golem comes along with another 30% damage reduction. I didn't have to invest in it at all with how much maximum life that we have, and he just never fell over in the pit. And the cool part about it is that activating your Golem gains you Unstoppable, and you reset your Golem cooldown incredibly fast, so you're able to spam this to effectively be permanently unstoppable. What it loses you at 35% damage multiplier, but if you are really frustrated and you just hate pushing without Unstoppable, this is a really good option. Yes, you use a little bit of damage, but the quality of life is absolutely bonkers. My skill tree is going to look a little bit different than what you're going to find in the planner because the planner will be ideal. This is what I'm currently dealing with. You may need to put the points into Unliving Energy if you're not hitting the maximum resource required to overpower on your Sever consistently. I no longer need that. I also used to play around with Blight. We're just not doing that anymore. Obviously maxing out Sever. Just 1 point in Blood Mist just to be able to trigger it. Want to max out both Fortitude as well as Titan's Fall. I currently need the points into Spiked Armor to be able to hit my armor cap. You may not need it, and the planner will not need it. Bone Prison with Bone Prison reduces your cooldown. Again, just 1 point here. You're going to notice that's just going to kind of die immediately whenever there's AoE. There's not a lot to do about it. You just got to spam the thing. Again, while we're not casting it, we pick up Abhorrent Decrepify, 3 points into Amp, 3 points into Death's Embrace, and 3 points into the Lucky Hit Chance passive. Down into Corpse Tendrils to be able to generate Blood Orbs. Again, we're using this for Blood Begets Blood in our Paragon board. Don't sleep on that. It's great, especially in huge packs of monsters. 50% damage is 50% damage. Shadow Tree, we actually don't want Crippling Darkness at all. We want to be able to control when we apply stuns to targets so we can control when monsters go unstoppable. This just adds a little bit too much randomness to the build that might stop you from being able to successfully pull monsters into one area for efficiency. I would want multiple points into Necrotic Carapace just to be able to build up Fortify that much faster after taking a big chunk of damage, but right now I just don't have the points. Just 1 point into Bone Spirit, you'll see I have plus 14 ranks here, and then Bone Spirit will regen essence after hitting a target. We do need the points in Rapid Ossification, because Rapid Ossification will very slightly increase our cooldown of Bone Spirit so that we can spam it against a single target. If you need the points for crit chance to hit crit cap, you're going to need to put points into Inspiring Leader. I currently do not need them with Grasping Veins. Building out the rest of Standalone, Memento Mori, as well as Finality. Only 1 point in Soul Rift right now because I just can't afford to pull points out of any other passives. And then obviously Affliction. The Paragon board is also going to look different in the ideal versus what I'm currently using because the rolls on my gear are not high enough for me to hit armor and res cap without it. I've picked up a ton of all res and armor in my Paragon, which you may also need. But again, that's just why it will look different from this video to the planner. Into the first board, we're going to be putting Amplify, huge multiplier here. We're also picking up as much maximum life nodes, just kind of across the board wherever we can. In Bloodbath, this is where we're currently putting Essence. I am building over to the damage resistance and all res here. I would also want the damage reduction while fortified. I just need the points for the all res right now. Building over into the Bone Graft board, this is really important to actually hit enough maximum Essence. As my gear gets better, I may no longer need this, and then I could basically regain all of these points here. The additional crit chance here is kind of nice on low gear. Maximum resource here, huge amount of maximum life. Here's where I have a minimum investment exploit. I would want to be able to put more points into this. I just don't have them right now. Blood begets blood for the 1, 2, 3 separate maximum life nodes. I just realized that I'm missing willpower. Once my build is slightly better, I will have 4% more maximum life over here. That's pretty great. Obviously picking up the legendary node, and then this is where I have a minimum investment on Dominate. Then building down into Frailty, we want the attack speed, we want the resistance and armor, the maximum life, legendary node, and then this is where I'm putting Eliminator, which also isn't activated. Oh no! Well, the run I just did would have been a lot better if both my glyph was activated here and my maximum life was activated here. That's why we check the planners. Always look there instead. That's frustrating. I've been slamming my head against this 94 clear for a little while now. What can you do? For your mercenaries, you want to pick up Variana building down here to gain attack speed, and more attack speed. And then here we're going to be putting right here because we want to be able to cast Bastion whenever we cast Bone Prison. You basically do Bone Prison when you're actually starting the fight. So the Bastion coming down to be able to absorb a huge amount of additional damage and then also gaining Unstoppable when it comes through is going to save your life more often than you think about it. But that's Overpower Sever. I did not think that Sever realistically was going to get past tier 90. And again, that was going to be on perfect gear, building it the much more classic way. And the cool part about this build is that the moment that they fix the temper that says that Sever has a chance to deal double damage, we're just going to swap over to that as well. We'll have to fix maximum essence a little bit more, just relying on Bone Prison, but you're going to take these over 2 billion hits that you're currently seeing, which again, each Sever does that much damage. So 4 per target, and just double it for free for all intents and purposes. It's going to be bananas nutty. We're talking about what, like 16 billion DPS, maybe even more if we get a little spicy and up our gear a bit further. But there you go, Overpower Sever. I want to see what the rest of the community does with this. I'm going to be moving on to different builds, so shout out down in the comments if you haven't already. If you're testing this out, coming to different conclusions, finding better ways of doing stuff, I'd love to hear from you. Also, if you're brand new here, how have you not hit the subscribe button yet? You've got to have seen one of my videos before. It helps me out a ton and make sure that you don't miss out on any of this news as it comes down the pipeline and as these innovations on builds come through as well. Click it. I promise you, you won't regret it. I don't spam you with notifications or anything. It just makes YouTube know that they should show my stuff to more people. Toss a like onto the video as well, and I appreciate you. That's enough of me shilling for myself. Thank you so much for watching this video. I truly hope that it helps you to better enjoy Season 6 and your own Sever Necromancer, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one.